A 9-year-old's innocent water stand sparked a furious showdown on a scorching summer day, but the real fireworks erupted when Karma arrived, not with the police, but with a shocking, perfectly timed twist. It was one of those scorching July afternoons where the heat radiates off the asphalt in shimmering waves. The air was thick, heavy, and smelled of freshly cut grass and chlorine from a neighbor's pool. I was trying to work from my home office, but the view from my window was far more interesting than the spreadsheet on my screen. My house sits on a corner lot, right where our sleepy suburban street meets the main jogging path that circles the community lake. And right there, at that prime piece of real estate, a tiny entrepreneur had set up shop. Her name was Jordan, a bright-eyed 9-year-old from a few streets over. She had a little red cooler, a wobbly card table, and a sign made of neon green poster board. In bubbly, multicolored letters, it read, "Ice cold water, $1. Help me get to coding camp." I'd already bought 2 bottles from her earlier, more for the cause than the thirst. She was polite, professional, and had a smile that could melt a glacier. Every time a jogger or a dog walker went by, she'd pipe up with a cheerful, "Stay hydrated, ice-cold water here." Most people smiled, and a good number of them stopped, happy to part with $1 for a cold drink and to support a kid with a goal. Business was good. The neighborhood, for the most part, seemed charmed. Then I saw her. Carol. Carol lived in the big beige house with the perfectly manicured lawn and the 3-car garage. She was the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood watch, the president of the HOA, and the kind of person who measures her neighbor's lawn height with a ruler. She was power-walking toward the corner, her expensive Lululemon outfit practically vibrating with righteous indignation. I watched her approach Jordan's little stand, her face tightening into a mask of disapproval. I felt a knot form in my stomach. I knew this wasn't going to be a friendly chat. "Excuse me," Carol said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. She didn't even slow her power-walking pace, just stopped abruptly in front of the table. Jordan, who was in the middle of counting her crumpled dollar bills, looked up with her signature bright smile. "Hi, would you like some water?" Carol completely ignored the question. She planted her hands on her hips. "What do you think you're doing?" Jordan's smile faltered, just for a second. "I'm selling water to raise money for my coding camp this summer." "A coding camp," Carol repeated, her tone dripping with condescension. "And does this business have a permit? Do you have a license to operate a commercial enterprise on public property?" I could see the confusion on Jordan's face. She was 9. She probably thought a permit was something you needed to drive a car. No. It's just water. My mom helped me buy it from Costco." "I don't care where you got it," Carol snapped. "This is a residential neighborhood, not a flea market. This kind of activity attracts elements. It lowers the tone of the community." At this point, I'd had enough. I pushed back from my desk, slid on my flip-flops, and headed out the front door. The blast of heat was intense, but the scene unfolding on my corner was making my blood boil even hotter. As I walked across my lawn, I could hear Carol escalating. "Furthermore, it's a liability. What if someone gets sick from your water? The HOA will be held responsible. You need to pack this up and go home. Now." Jordan was standing her ground, bless her heart, but her lower lip was trembling. "I'm not hurting anyone. People are happy to buy it." "That's not the point." That's when I stepped in. "Is there a problem here, Carol?" I asked, keeping my voice as calm and even as I could. Carol spun around, momentarily surprised to see me. "Oh, Mark. Yes, there is a problem. This child is running an illegal business on our corner. It's unseemly." "She's a 9-year-old kid selling dollar bottles of water on a 100-degree day, Carol. I think it's enterprising." I turned to Jordan and gave her a reassuring wink. "In fact, I think I'm feeling thirsty again." I pulled a $5 bill from my pocket. "I'll take a water, Jordan, and you can keep the change." Jordan's face lit up, a small victory in the face of this suburban tyrant. But as she reached into the cooler, Carol took it to the next level. She whipped out her pearl-white iPhone, her thumb hovering over the screen. "That's it," she said, her voice dangerously low. "I tried to be reasonable. You've given me no choice." My blood ran cold. "Carol, what are you doing?" Don't you dare! But she wasn't listening to me. She was looking right at Jordan, a 9-year-old girl with pure malice in her eyes. She pressed the call button. Her voice instantly transformed, becoming shaky and filled with faux fear. Yes, hello. I'd like to report a disturbance. There's a girl. She looks to be unsupervised. She's on the corner of Oak Street and Willow Lane. She's approaching people, trying to sell things. I'm concerned for the safety of the neighborhood. She was actually doing it. She was calling the police on a little girl selling water. I stood there, absolutely stunned, watching this woman weave a fantasy of a dangerous situation out of a harmless summer hustle. Jordan's eyes were wide with fear, the dollar bills clutched in her small hand. Carol hung up the phone, a cruel, triumphant smirk playing on her lips. She looked from Jordan's terrified face to my disgusted one. They said an officer is on the way. They'll handle this. She crossed her arms, settling in to watch the show she had just produced. She thought she had won. What Carol didn't know, what none of us could have possibly known at that moment, was that the universe had just received her call, too, and its response time was going to be a hell of a lot faster than the local police departments. The 10 minutes that followed felt like an eternity. The oppressive heat of the sun was nothing compared to the icy silence that descended on our little corner. Carol stood with her arms folded, a statue of suburban entitlement, her gaze fixed on the road as if willing the police to materialize. Jordan, on the other hand, had shrunk into herself. The bright, bubbly entrepreneur was gone, replaced by a scared little girl who kept glancing from Carol's stony face to me, her eyes silently asking what she'd done wrong. You've done nothing wrong, I said quietly, making sure Jordan could hear me. Absolutely nothing. Then I took out my own phone. I held it up, making sure the lens was pointed squarely at Carol, and pressed record. Just so we're all clear, Carol, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I am now recording this entire interaction. For everyone's safety, of course. Carol's eyes narrowed into slits. Go ahead. It will only prove that I am a concerned citizen upholding our community bylaws. What bylaw is that, Carol? I shot back. The one against 9-year-olds having ambition. The one against kids trying to better themselves? The one against being a black girl in a nice neighborhood? A flash of anger crossed her face. This has nothing to do with race. It has to do with rules. This is what happens when you let things slide. First it's an unlicensed water stand. Next it's graffiti and teenagers loitering. You have to nip it in the bud. It was the most ridiculous, thinly veiled garbage I had ever heard. A few other neighbors had started to notice the standoff. Mrs. Gable from 2 houses down was peering through her blinds. The Henderson boys, who had been riding their bikes, now circled at a safe distance, watching the drama unfold. Carol was getting her audience, just not the one she expected. I knelt down to Jordan's level. Hey, I said softly, don't you listen to her. You're awesome. Coding camp, huh? That's seriously cool. What language are you hoping to learn? Her eyes, still wide with fear, flickered with a tiny spark of their earlier light. Python, she whispered. My teacher said it's good for making games. Python is amazing, I said, my voice full of genuine enthusiasm. My company uses it for all our data analysis. You're going to be a rock star. This seemed to enrage Carol even more. Fraternizing with her isn't going to change the fact that she's breaking the rules, Mark, she hissed. She's a child, I said, standing up again, putting myself between them. And you're a bully. That's when we heard the sound of an approaching vehicle. But it wasn't the telltale siren of a police cruiser. It was the low, expensive purr of a luxury sedan. A gleaming black Lexus glided to a stop, right next to the curb. Carol visibly preened, a smug little smile returning to her face. She clearly thought it was one of her well-to-do friends, arriving just in time to see her put the riff-raff in their place. The tinted passenger window slid down with a silent hum. Inside sat a woman who radiated elegance. She had perfectly coiffed silver hair, a tasteful pearl necklace, and a warm, intelligent face that looked vaguely familiar. She surveyed the scene with a curious expression. Me, standing protectively, a terrified-looking little girl behind a cooler, and Carol, puffed up like a toad. Carol's face went from smug to ghostly white in a nanosecond. I'd never seen color drain from a person so fast. Her jaw went slack. "Mrs. Davenport!" she squeaked out, her voice suddenly an octave higher. The woman in the car, Mrs. Davenport, gave a polite, slightly confused smile. "Carol, I was just on my way to the club for the foundation luncheon. I must say, I'm surprised to see you here." Her eyes drifted past Carol and landed on Jordan's hand-painted sign. Her smile widened. "Coding camp," she read aloud, her voice filled with delight. "Well, isn't that just the most wonderful thing I've seen all day?" She looked at Carol, her brow furrowed in genuine confusion. "I thought your call was about some sort of public menace." Carol's face cycled through a series of emotions: shock, terror, and finally a desperate attempt at damage control. "Eleanor," she sputtered, forcing a laugh that sounded more like a choked gasp. I was just worried about the girl, all alone out here in this heat, and the traffic on this road. I called to make sure she was safe, that an officer could just check on her." She gestured vaguely at Jordan's stand. "And, you know, the bylaws." Mrs. Davenport Eleanor didn't even glance at Carol. Her warm, intelligent eyes were locked on Jordan. She opened her car door and stepped out, moving with a grace that defied the sweltering heat. She was even more imposing in person. "Bylaws are for maintaining a community's quality of life, Carol," she said, her voice pleasant but edged with steel. "And I can't imagine anything that enhances our community more than the ambition of a young woman like this." She walked right up to the wobbly card table, her expensive heels sinking slightly into the soft grass. She looked at Jordan, who was staring up at her with a mixture of awe and fear. "Hello there," Mrs. Davenport said, her smile genuine. "My name is Eleanor, and I think what you're doing is absolutely brilliant. Python, you said?" I nearly dropped my phone. She must have overheard my conversation with Jordan. Jordan just nodded, speechless. "My foundation offers scholarships for young women in STEM," Eleanor continued, pulling a sleek leather wallet from her handbag. "We are always looking for candidates with your kind of initiative." She took out a crisp $100 bill. "I'm on my way to a luncheon, and I'm dreadfully thirsty. I'll take 1 bottle of your finest water, and please, accept this as a donation to your education, an investment in our future." Jordan's jaw dropped. She looked at the $100 bill, then at me, then back at Eleanor, as if she couldn't believe it was real. She carefully took the money and handed Eleanor a water bottle, her hands trembling slightly. "Thank you," she whispered. Carol looked like she had swallowed a hornet. This was the exact opposite of the public shaming she had orchestrated. She was watching her social standing crumble in real time. Mrs. Eleanor Davenport was not just some wealthy resident. She was the Eleanor Davenport, the matriarch of the family that had basically founded this town, and the chairperson of the Davenport Charitable Foundation, the most prestigious, influential organization in the county. Carol had been trying to get on their gala committee for years, and I was getting all of it on video. Just as Carol opened her mouth to try and salvage the situation, a new sound cut through the air. This time it was the unmistakable chirp of a police radio, followed by the sight of a squad car turning the corner. It rolled to a slow, deliberate stop behind Mrs. Davenport's Lexus. The final piece of Carol's plan had arrived, only now it was a ticking bomb she had set for herself. A tall, broad-shouldered officer stepped out of the car. He looked young, but had a calm, no-nonsense air about him. He adjusted his sunglasses and surveyed our strange little gathering. The fancy lady in pearls, the little girl with a cooler, me with my phone held up, and Carol, who was practically vibrating with a toxic mix of fury and panic. "Folks, what seems to be the trouble here?" the officer asked, his voice even. Before anyone else could speak, Carol surged forward. This was her last chance to control the narrative. "Officer, thank heavens," she exclaimed, her voice shrill. "I'm the one who called. This girl," she pointed an accusatory finger at Jordan, "is operating an illegal business. She has no permit. She's soliciting people on the street, and it's a clear violation of City Ordinance 34B. I was concerned for public safety." The officer listened patiently, his expression unreadable behind his shades. He glanced at Jordan's little stand, then at the single bottle of water in Mrs. Davenport's hand, then at the $100 bill Jordan was still clutching. His eyes finally met mine, noting the recording phone, and a flicker of understanding crossed his face. He seemed to grasp the entire situation in a single, sweeping glance. He took a slow breath, looking back at the woman who had wasted his time on a 100-degree day. He completely ignored her complaint. "Actually, ma'am, dispatch sent me to this block for a different reason," he said, his tone shifting from routine to serious. "We received a 911 call from the gas station down the street about a hit and run. A driver smashed into one of the pumps and then sped off. The manager got a partial plate and a description of the car." Carol's face was a mask of confusion. "A hit and run? What does that have to do with this?" The officer pushed his sunglasses up onto his forehead. His eyes were clear and direct. He looked straight at Carol, his gaze unwavering. "The car was a late-model blue Mustang with significant front-end damage. We ran the partial plate. It's registered to this address." He pointed a thumb directly at Carol's perfectly manicured 3-car garage house. "Your house. Tell me, Mum, does your son Kevin still drive a blue Mustang?" The silence that followed the officer's question was profound. The oppressive afternoon heat suddenly felt frigid. Every eye on the corner mine, Jordan's, Mrs. Davenport's, even the Henderson boys who had stopped circling on their bikes, was locked on Carol. The blood drained from her face for a second time, leaving her skin a pasty, sickly shade of beige that almost matched her house. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no sound came out. The self-assured queen of the HOA had been checkmated in a single move. My son," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "Kevin? No, he's at his summer internship. He took his car this morning." The officer's face remained impassive, but his eyes were like steel drills boring into her flimsy alibi. "Is that so? Because the manager at the gas station gave us a very clear description of the driver. Said he was a young man, early 20s, wearing a red baseball cap and a gray university sweatshirt. Said he looked panicked and reeked of alcohol. He let that hang in the air for a moment. The gas station has excellent security cameras, ma'am. Crystal clear, HD. Carol began to unravel. Her posture, once ramrod straight with indignation, wilted. Her hands fluttered uselessly at her sides. "There must be some mistake," she pleaded, her gaze darting between the officer and the imposing figure of Mrs. Davenport, as if looking for an ally where none existed. Mrs. Davenport, however, looked at Carol with an expression of deep disappointment. "Carol," she said, her voice soft but firm, "perhaps it would be best if you focused on your own household's issues rather than policing the entrepreneurial spirit of a 9-year-old. It was a quiet, devastating dismissal. A social guillotine." The officer seemed to agree. He pulled out a small notepad. "I'm going to need you to come with me to your house, ma'am. We need to see the vehicle, and we're going to need to have a talk with Kevin." He gestured toward her perfect beige house. "Right now." Defeated, Carol turned. Her power walk had been replaced by a slow, shuffling shamble. As she passed me, she shot me a look of pure venom, a silent promise of future HOA-related vengeance, but it had no heat. It was the empty threat of a deposed tyrant. I just held my phone up a little higher, a silent reminder that her performance was still being documented. She and the officer walked across the street, leaving a stunned silence in their wake. The moment they were gone, it was as if the corner could breathe again. The tension evaporated into the humid air. Mrs. Davenport turned to Jordan, her expression softening completely. "Now," she said with a bright smile, "don't let any of that nonsense discourage you. You have a fire in you, young lady. You keep that burning." She pulled a business card from her wallet. "This is my direct line at the foundation. When you're ready to apply for that STEM scholarship, you call me personally. We'll make sure you get to coding camp, and many more camps after that." Jordan, who had been watching the entire exchange with wide, unblinking eyes, finally found her voice. "Really?" she asked, her voice filled with a fragile, hopeful wonder. "Absolutely," Mrs. Davenport confirmed. She then looked at me. "And thank you, Mark, for standing up for her. It's comforting to know there are still good neighbors in this world." I finally stopped recording. "She's a great kid." Carol was completely out of line. Mrs. Davenport nodded, then looked back at her Lexus where her driver was waiting patiently. "Well, I'm late for my luncheon. Jordan, it was a pleasure to invest in your business." With a final warm smile, she got back in her car, and the black sedan purred away, leaving us on the quiet corner. For a moment, Jordan and I just stood there. Then she looked down at the crisp $100 bill in one hand and the elegant business card in the other. A huge, brilliant smile spread across her face, chasing away the last of the fear and confusion. It was the same smile I'd seen earlier, the one that could melt glaciers. I think I've raised enough for today," she said, her voice brimming with excitement. I chuckled. "Yeah, I think you have. That was some pretty good karma, wasn't it?" She looked up at me, her eyes sparkling with a wisdom beyond her 9 years. "What's karma?" I thought about how to explain it, how to describe the universe balancing its books on a suburban street corner, how a woman filled with petty hatred tried to crush a little girl's dream, only to have her own world come crashing down around her because of a hit and run, a well-timed Lexus, and a police officer with a good memory. "Karma," I said, kneeling down to help her pack up her little red cooler, "is when you try to create a storm for someone else, and you end up getting struck by lightning yourself." She giggled as we folded up her wobbly table. The world felt right again. The sun was still hot, the air still thick, but the corner of Oak and Willow no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like a launching pad for a future Python programmer. And as for Carol, we didn't see her for weeks. The blue Mustang disappeared from her driveway that same afternoon, and the gossip mill churned out stories of lawyers, restitution, and a very expensive stint in rehab for Kevin. Her reign was over, and it had all come undone in the 10 minutes it took for Karma to find her address.